Hello and welcome to my video tutorial for the lab titled IP addressing. In this lab we're going to configure a few devices, put IP addresses, and just kind of get an understanding of how IP addresses work across multiple networks. So let's go ahead and get started. So on part one I'm going to go ahead and build the lab. So I need to bring a router over and I'm going to use this Ethernet switch, and I need 2 of those, and then I need 4 Alpine Linux hosts. So I'll start clicking and dragging those over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now once I have my devices over, I'm going to go ahead and start all devices while I get this a little bit better configured and looking neater. Switch 2. Go. Switch 2 is there. Switch 1. Bring my devices up. So I've got my devices. They look pretty good. Now I need to make some connections, so I'll use my connection tool, connect switch 1, Ethernet 0 to the router on Ethernet 1. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on my labels so I can see that. And then I'll make a connection 0 to 2. 0 to 2. Here I'm going to connect Ethernet 0 to Ethernet 1, Ethernet 2, Ethernet 0, Ethernet 3, sometimes when I do these connections I always like to use the actual name of the host to the port number, so that's why I have like Alpine Linux 4 connected to Ethernet 4. In larger, more complex labs, this makes it just kind of easier for me to know which port is connected to which device. So now I'm going to turn off my tool and I can go ahead and move some of these labels around. I can actually even move the host name if I wanted to. But just to make this a little bit cleaner, and as I'm looking at my diagram I know exactly what is connected to what. Now the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to create some rectangles here. And the reason I do this is just to help understand what's connected to what. It makes it so much easier, especially on some more complex labs, knowing which devices are in which networks and everything. It saves a lot of confusion and it takes a little bit of time, but it saves time in the long run. So I'm going to click the square tool and just add a couple of squares. And then, oops, I had multiple items selected there, so let me fix that. Now I can just go here and click and drag and resize these squares. Notice that these 2 squares are over. They're on the top layer. They were the most recently added devices. So I'll have to send them back a level. Get that adjusted. There we go. Perfect. Now I'm going to take this one, drag it out. Now to put these to the back, I can just right click on the squares and lower them. And now my squares are in the back. But I don't really like this border because it kind of interferes with the name of the device. So what I like to do a lot of times is I'll right click and go to style, and I'll change the fill color. What did I do on my example? I think I did yellow, so I'll pick yellow and I'll click OK. Now if I apply that right now I can see my black background, and I do that this way because now when I go to the border color I can just click pick screen color and boom, there I have my border color. And if I click, it has the same color as my background, and once I apply it, there goes my border. And I'll do the same thing for this square. Style, and I think that one, what did I do that one? And I did that in kind of a light blue, so I'll change my fill color to this light blue. And then I will change the border. I could just click on the light blue. I can do it that way also. And once I click apply, now I've got my 2 networks in different colors. Makes things a lot easier in the long run. So I've got my 2 screen captures done. I've got my lab done. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and put my IP addresses using the notes tool. So using this, I can create a note. And the notes tool has a duplicate function, so I can just duplicate this a few times. And then I'll put this one right here. That's 1, 1. And then I'll take this one, put it right there, and then I can go into text edit, and here I can change the font color and even the font size, but all I really want to do is just make that 1 a 2 and click OK. Then actually, yeah, I'll just do it this way. Put this one up here, and that's going to be 2.13. And then 2.14 was going to be over here. There we go, 2.14. Another thing I like to do is I always like to have my host IP address match my device name or my device number. Makes it a little bit easier to remember what the addresses are when you do testing. And duplicate that one more time, and I'll change that to 1.12. I can put that right here under device 2, and then this one I can change to 1.11. So now I've got all of my devices. It saves so much time in the long run to have your diagram have the IP addresses on there. Keeps you from making mistakes, makes it easier when you want to test things. You can look right at your diagram. You don't have to go back to a lab sheet or anything to find that. So now I've got everything done. I've got my diagram, I've got all my IP address labels done, and now I can move on to part 2. I'm going to start configuring IP addresses. So now that my devices have had some time to boot up, I should be able to click the console, connect to all nodes, and open that up on a different window. And give me a second. It's not letting me bring it over because it keeps refreshing. Okay, I had a lot of extra devices already on here, so I'm just going to close everything and then re-console connect to all nodes. Let me just close these real quick because see, I had these other console sessions open. So now let me do console connect to all nodes again. And I don't need this tab, so now I've got my devices, router. So now I've got my console terminal open, and so let's go in and start configuring things. So the first thing I want to do is add IP addresses on all host devices. So for that, the address is IP address add 192.168.1.11/24 device. Now I'm in the router. I need to be on that tab. I wonder if I can copy. I think I can. Let me see. Nope. Maybe control insert will let me copy. I'm just trying to see if I can, and then we'll control it. And it did let me copy it, but it pasted the carriage return on there, so that didn't do me any good. So now I have to delete it. So let me up arrow. You do up arrow again to add it, and I'll change that to 12. And ifconfig will let me verify it. The Alpine Linux 2 is indeed 1.12. And that is 1.11. So let me go to Alpine Linux 3. I'm not going to get fancy this time. I'll just type the command. And ifconfig just to make sure. And then Alpine Linux 4. And I do have my 4 IP addresses on here, so then the next step is I'm going to have to go into the router. And the way we do this is on the router I have to log in. The username is admin, and there is no password. Now I'm in user exec mode from this router. I'm unable to really do much from this mode, so I have to go into the privilege command set. To do that, I type enable. And now I'm in the privilege commands. And then if I want to configure anything, I have to enter global config mode, so I'll type configure configure terminal. Now notice my prompt has changed. I am in global config mode. This is where I can make configuration changes. So the first thing I want to do is just name this device. And by naming the device with the host name command, notice my prompt will change. It makes it a little bit easier to know what device you're in when the prompt tells you. And then now I need to go into interface Ethernet 1. And now any commands I make will apply to that interface. So the first thing I want to do is give it its IP address 192.168.1.1, and the subnet mask. And now I need to turn the interface on also, because router interfaces are turned off by default. So I'll type no shutdown. And now I can exit out of interface config mode for that. I'm going to use the up arrow to cycle through the command, and I'll just have to change that to interface 2. Can I use the up arrow to get, and there we go. I can use the up arrow and just use the left and right arrow to change that from a 2 to a 1. And now I've got both my interfaces, no shutdown. So I believe I have both interfaces, but let me just double check. Exit, exit, I'm out of config mode. Now I can issue a show command, show interface. If I want to view all the interfaces, I can do it like that, but if I want to specify an interface, I can indeed confirm that Ethernet 1 is up, its protocol is up, it's connected, that's a good sign, that's what I'm looking for. And then I can confirm that my IP address is indeed correct, and I'll just use the up arrow again and change Ethernet 1 to Ethernet 2. And Ethernet 2, it's up, and I've got my IP addresses configured properly. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to see if I can ping. It's always important before you move on to the next step in a lot of these devices. Check and make sure everything's working right before you go to the next step. If you try to rush through a lab and you make a mistake, then you get to the end and you have no idea where your problem is. So let's just make sure that we can ping everything. So I'm going to try ping 192.168.1.11. Let me see if I can ping Alpine Linux 1. And with Linux, or the router, it's going to send 5 ping commands. So now I'm going to do the up arrow, and I'll ping 1.12. Okay, so the router can ping the two Alpine Linux 1 and Alpine Linux 2. Let me check Alpine Linux 3 with the up arrow, and I'll change that to 2.13. And I can do the up arrow again and change 2.13 to 2.14. So I've pinged. It looks, it's not pinging 2.14. So let me double check. Maybe I made a mistake here. So let me look at Alpine Linux 4, 192.168.2.14. And Alpine Linux 4 is indeed connected. So let me see why. Did I mistype it? 192.168. Let me check this. It said I could not ping 192.168.2.14. Let me check that again. And it is indeed timing out. So let's see what's going on here. I was able to ping 2.13. So that tells me that this interface appears to be up and working properly. But I can't ping 2.14. If I go back to the device and double check 192, okay, I did not, look what I did here. My net mask is 255.255.255.255. I need to get that changed. So let me just change this real quick. If I look right here, I did 2.14. I did not specify the prefix length, so I've got a 32-bit address there. So let me fix that. Actually, I can probably just cycle through the up arrows, and I want to delete that. Now I can add it and just add the prefix length, and now I've got all of them corrected. So now let me double check, and this is why you always ping everything, just to make sure before you get too far into a lab and you can't figure it out. So I did indeed mess up an address, and as I was talking and thinking, I wasn't really paying attention with ifconfig. I missed that, but now I know, and now I can ping it. So I have completed part 2, step 3. I've verified the configuration. So now let me see about pinging localhost. So I'm going to go to Alpine Linux 1, and I'm going to try to ping Alpine Linux 2. And Linux, when it does a ping, it's going to ping continuously. So let's take a look at that. Ping 1.12. If you scroll this down a little bit, we can actually see the address. There we go. I want to ping 1.12. And it's not going to stop. It's going to ping forever until I tell it to stop. So I can hit Control C to stop it. So I can ping 1.12. But if I try to ping 2.13, at first glance, you might think that you can ping this address, but you can't. And the reason you can't ping it is because Alpine Linux 1 and 2 can talk to each other because they're on the same network. But they can't ping Alpine Linux 3 and 4 because we haven't told 1 and 2 where to send packets to remote networks. And if we want to verify that, we can actually look at the routing table as well. So let me just go to Linux 1 and do the command route. And Alpine Linux 1, it only knows how to get to devices on the 192.168.1 network. It does not know what to do with packets for other devices. So we're going to add a static route into Alpine Linux 1 so it knows if it needs to send packets to anybody outside of this network in yellow, it needs to send it to router 1, Ethernet 1, because the router is the one that knows how to get to both networks. So we'll do the command IP route add default. IP route add default via 192.168.1.1. And I'm going to have to do that on both devices. So now Linux 1 and Linux 2 know to send a packet to remote networks, they got to send it to router 1. But if I try to ping right now, I'm still not going to be successful because what's going to happen is the ping is going to go from 1, it'll get to the router will send it to Linux 3, but Linux 3 doesn't know how to respond to it. It does not know to send a response to a remote network that it needs to send it here. So we need to go into Alpine Linux 3 and do IP route add default via 192.168.2.1. It's got to send it to an address it knows how to get to. That's the only address of the router that these two host devices can get to. So their default gateway is going to be 2.1. And then Alpine Linux 4, IP route add default via 192.168.2.1. So we've got our default routes configured on all 4 devices. Now let's see, the next step, I should just be able to ping everything. So on Alpine Linux 1, I'm going to try that ping again. And I'm going to try to ping. I'm going to just limit it to 4 pings with the C. Right there, the dash C will say the count of 4. 192.168.2.13. And now I'm going to send 4 pings. I don't have to hit Control C at the end. And I did get 4 successful pings to 2.13. And let me do the up arrow, and then I will try 2.14. And I was indeed successful in pinging both devices. I don't need to go from Alpine Linux 3 and 4 and see if they can ping 1, because if 1 can send a message and get a response from 3, then 3 can send a message and get a response from 1. Simple enough. And then if Alpine Linux 2, I could try the same there, but I think that's everything for the successful screen captures. So anyway, I hope this lesson has been informative for you, and thanks for watching.